This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have Joe Kissell back with us again. He's written another book. I think this is like the 200th this year. I'm not sure.
Please. It's only book number 47.
So, is that really all? Is that all? It's good to see you, Joe. Thanks for being here again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Have you changed something in your office? Because it looks subtly different from the last time.
I tried to clean it up just a little bit, but
okay. Right.
I've got a bunch of personal projects going, and there's something about personal projects that just seem to explode all over my office.
I know how that is.
I kind of thought you might. Joe, this time I'm excited to talk to you about this because of the topic. This is Take Control of FileVault.
Yes.
A lot of us have been waiting for this book and waiting for your treatment of it because, honestly, FileVault scares us. It scares me. I don't use it. I know I should. I know it's good practice, especially on a laptop where I could lose it or someone could lift it out of my car or, worse, maybe out of a bag.
Yep.
But it still scares me because of the nature of it. So should I be scared of FileVault?
No, you shouldn't be scared. You should be informed. If you are properly informed, you have no need to be scared. Now, of course, you should have good backups, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I knew that word was coming.
What would I can't carry on a 5-minute conversation with you without backups coming up. So there's that. You know, of course you're going to have backups, but your data is a lot safer with FileVault than without. And I think, with rare exceptions, pretty much everyone should be using it all the time. And I learned, you know, as I was telling you before we started recording, when I started working on this book, I thought, oh, well, you know, I'll be able to crank out 30, maybe 40 pages. How much is there really to say about FileVault, right? And then, you know, 95 pages later, it's like, wow. As it turns out, there's a lot to say about a lot that I didn't know. I thought it was a lot simpler and more straightforward than I learned that it was. So there were some surprises to me. I learned a lot, and I believe, you know, there are a lot of websites that talk about FileVault and a lot of books, including some of mine, that mention it. But this is the definitive reference. I mean, just before I started working on this book, like the night before I started working on it, a woman wrote to me. She had read one of my other books, and I guess I had mentioned FileVault, and she's like, yes, but what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And I'm like, yes, those are really good questions. Here are the answers, but she's like, you know, I have spent hours Googling, and I'm seeing contradictory information about FileVault. Is this really true, or is that really true? And nobody seems to answer this question. And what about this? And what about this? And I'm like, it's true. There are a lot of things that are contradictory on the web about FileVault, and a lot of things that aren't explained well, and a lot of things that aren't explained at all. So I decided I was just going to fix that problem once and for all. I'm going to figure out exactly what's going on with FileVault and explain it all. So this is everything, you know. This is why you should or should not use it. What about, you know, choosing passwords, and what about locking and unlocking and external drives and performance issues and backups and the whole 9 yards. So this is everything you need to know about FileVault.
Now, we seem to have kind of jumped into the deep end here, so I'm going to ask you to step back just a second and give us a 60-second overview of what FileVault is, because honestly, I thought there were only about 3 questions to ask, and one of them is, how do you flip the switch? And I know where to find the switch, so you know, that's it. But what is FileVault, and why should we be using it?
FileVault is full disk encryption for your Mac. It's a feature that's built into your Mac and has been since Lion. Now, before Lion, there was something that was called FileVault that was different. The pre-Lion version of FileVault, and I have to, you know, as I'm talking about this, I'm going to look at my document because I want to make sure I'm getting my facts correct. Right. Okay, so a feature called FileVault was introduced in Panther, which was 10.3. Back in the Panther days, FileVault was a feature that you turned on in System Preferences, and it would encrypt just your home folder and everything in your home folder. And the point of FileVault was to keep your data safe. So if your computer were lost or stolen, your data would be safe. If your roommate or someone else, you know, coworker, got a hold of your computer, your data would be safe from them. The problem with the way it was originally implemented was that there were serious performance issues, there were some bugs, and it was designed in such a way that basically a very small, very minor disk error could lead to you losing all of your data. And that problem was compounded by the fact that with the original version of FileVault, Time Machine didn't work very well. Time Machine could back up your entire home folder and restore your entire home folder, but could only do these things when you're logged out. It couldn't back up and restore individual files in your home folder. So that was really awful. Well, in Lion, Apple replaced the old version of FileVault, which they now call Legacy FileVault, with FileVault 2. FileVault 2 is completely different. Instead of just encrypting your home folder, it encrypts everything, literally every file on your startup volume. It does not have the performance problems that the original FileVault did. It plays really well with Time Machine and other backup programs. And it's much easier to use and much safer. So whereas I never recommended using the original FileVault, I have been recommending that you use FileVault 2 since the days of Lion. But in all those years, the several years since Lion came out, kind of the only thing you could find out about it was what you said. Well, you go into this place and you turn it on, and that's about it, right? But there's so much more to know about it, and I've gotten a lot of questions about it. So I wanted to answer all those questions and also preemptively answer questions people didn't realize they had. So so this book tells the whole story. But basically, FileVault, built-in way of keeping all the files on your Mac safe from prying eyes.
I know you have a lot of questions answered in the book. I'll ask a couple here so that people can get an idea for FileVault and whether they should explore it further. So I have my Mac set up so that I require a password to log in. Or if it goes first to sleep for a little while, then I have to enter a password. Right. Is that the same password, or is there going to be another password or another set of hoops I have to jump through when I log back into a FileVault encrypted machine?
By default, it will use the same password. By default, your login password is also the password that unlocks FileVault. If you don't want it to be that way, if you would prefer to have two different passwords because it would give you greater security with the trade-off of greater inconvenience, it's possible to change one or the other. Now, what's interesting is that Apple does not make that particularly easy or obvious. If you want to change your FileVault password, you got to go into the command line. If you want to change your login password, you can do that in System Preferences, but it's obnoxious. So there are reasons someone might want to do that. I don't want to do that. I think that's too complicated. I think I would personally rather just have a really great password for my login password and then use the same one for FileVault. That seems more convenient for me. But you can do it either way if you want.
Okay. It strikes me just as a little strange that how would I log into my Mac but not log into FileVault? I mean, what would I have access to if it's encrypted?
Well, what would happen? So when you enable FileVault, Apple does some little tricks so it doesn't look like something sneaky is going on, but really something really sneaky is going on. You know how your Mac has a recovery HD volume, so that this again has been the case since Lion. But if you restart your Mac and you press Command R, you reboot in this special recovery mode where all you can do is like you can reinstall OS 10, you can run disk utility, you can run terminal, a couple other things. And this happens because the OS 10 installer, starting with Lion, put a little tiny hidden partition on your Mac that's just big enough to contain a minimal version of OS 10 that you can boot from, but nothing else. In addition to that, there is your Mac's firmware, EFI, Extensible Firmware Interface. The very first thing that you do when you boot up your Mac is it loads its firmware, and so there's a window of opportunity. There are sort of two different windows of opportunity, but before anything on your disk has been loaded, before Mac OS 10 itself has loaded, before it has read in any of those files that contain like your username or your password, any of those kinds of things, this EFI system says, okay, before you do anything else, I got to unlock FileVault. So please give me your password to do that. And you see a login screen that looks a lot like a regular login screen, but really that's EFI there. That's your EFI login screen that has just loaded enough, just enough information to A, grab your username and password, and B, tell FileVault to unlock itself. Once you get past that screen, then you go into the regular OS 10 boot process. Now, depending on how you have it set up, you might just sail right through the rest of the process. You've entered your password. It's like, okay, that's the same as your login password. We're good. We'll just go ahead and log you in. Or you might have it set up to prompt you again for your login password. But basically, your Mac is going to use just this tiny piece of code that is only big enough to know how to ask for your password and decrypt FileVault. And then you get on to the regular login stuff.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so one of your favorite topics is backups.
Yeah.
And if we followed your advice, hopefully we have at least 2 or 3 different kinds of backups. We have the clone drives, we have backups of our data, we have online backup services like CrashPlan, Backblaze, Dolly Drive.
Yeah.
How you say that FileVault 2 plays well with those. What am I sending to those services? Am I sending FileVault encrypted data, or am I just sending the normal data that I'm sending now? And so does that mean that on their end it's double encrypted in some fashion?
Good question, common question. Here's the thing you need to know about FileVault. FileVault encrypts the stuff that's on your disk only while it's on your disk. You take something that's on your disk and you put it someplace else, it's not encrypted. You copy something to a network volume, you burn a CD, you put it in drop, whatever. You put it someplace that's not on your disk, it's not encrypted. The encryption only works inside the container. So let's say I plug in, a little external hard drive, and I use, whatever, Time Machine, Super Duper, Carbon Copy Cloner, whatever it is, to back up to that external hard drive. By default, that stuff won't be encrypted, even though my internal hard drive is encrypted with FileVault. Even if I clone the entire drive, every single block on the drive, it still won't be encrypted because the process of copying it decrypts it. You can encrypt it if you want to. That's an optional separate step. And in my book, I talk about 3 different methods whereby you can encrypt an external backup. I mean, for example, if you use Time Machine, there's a little checkbox in the Time Machine preference pane, and where the little window where you select a disk, you can say encrypt this. And you check that box, and great. Time Machine will encrypt your backups. You can also use the same underlying mechanism that FileVault uses, which is called core storage, to encrypt any arbitrary external volume. You can set this up before you do your clone. You can set it up afterwards. There are some little gotchas and yada, 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 which I talk about in the book. But basically, you can use the same underlying mechanism to encrypt any external volume, and then clone your Mac or use whatever form of backup you want to make sure that that's encrypted. But unless you manually go through one of these procedures, your data will not automatically be encrypted. It's the same thing if, like, my disk is encrypted with FileVault and I email an attachment to you. Well, that email attachment won't be encrypted because in the process of being read off of my disk, it's decrypted.
Okay. The other big concern I would have with FileVault is the performance hit, that encrypting files takes CPU power and decrypting files take CPU power. So is that something that I'm going to notice? Is there going to be a pause every time I do something, or is it pretty transparent?
It's super transparent. I actually ran Geekbench on a couple of computers before turning on FileVault and after turning on FileVault. So I actually did benchmark testing. And the post-FileVault benchmarks went down like a fraction of 1%. I mean, a trivially small amount. It's not a zero performance hit, but it is really trivially small. One of the reasons this happens is that newer core, I think i5 and higher processors and Xeon processors actually have special circuitry built into them that is dedicated to encrypting and decrypting AES, which is the type of encryption that FileVault uses. So it doesn't have to affect your CPU at all, well, barely at all, because it's using this sort of special circuitry that is just for that task. Even on, like, I have this older MacBook Pro back here that doesn't have that kind of CPU, but even that one showed a very, very low amount of performance decrease due to FileVault. And it's just very, very efficient. It only decrypts, it encrypts everything when you start out, and then it only decrypts things as needed, and it's done in a very intelligent way that is basically transparent. I would not say there's zero performance hit. There is some, but in most cases, for most types of data, especially on a modern computer with a Core i5 or i7 or Xeon processor, you're really unlikely to notice it. And this is especially the case, even more true if you're using an SSD, because SSDs make the transfer of data to and from the storage so much faster that covers over a lot of those those performance things that you would otherwise feel more if it had to come off of a spinning disk.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Today, I want to encourage you to explore the power of Text Expander. Yes, that's right, the power of Text Expander. I'm trying to compile a list of the software that I use the most, that I consider essential, and Text Expander is leading the pack. That's because I keep finding new uses for it by looking at all the things I do day in and day out, over and over, and realize how easy it is to make and use Text Expander to streamline the process. For me, that's writing up posts on MacVoices that often contain many of the same elements, all of the email tasks associated with setting up interviews, and submitting information to various promotional channels. And that doesn't even start to touch what happens at the office. And all those tasks are easier with the power of Text Expander. But what if you're not sure where to get started? I want to help you with that in the next few editions of the show by telling you where to go to get some snippets that will help you and get you familiar with, yes, you guessed it, the power of Text Expander. For your first trip, head over to smilesoftware.com and take a look at their predefined snippets groups page. There you will find snippets for accent words, snippets to correct typos in several languages, HTML and CSS snippets if you're into internet coding, internet productivity snippets that can help shorten URLs, and more, and symbol snippets that will keep you from searching for the cent or euro symbols. And make special note of the Tidbits autocorrect dictionary. a must-install for TextExpander that will correct 2,400 common misspellings. Snippets are easy to install and easy to learn. In fact, the autocorrect snippets don't require any learning. They're just there, waiting in the background, ready to fix your mistakes quickly and automatically. Look at them all and get started with TextExpander today. Get a demo version of TextExpander at smilesoftware.com, then buy directly from the website or on the Mac App Store. Soon, you'll be hooked on the power of TextExpander. Smile, the makers of world-class software like TextExpander and TextExpander Touch for iPhone and iPad. Thanks to Smile for sponsoring this edition of MacVoices. A laptop is the obvious candidate for this because it's a lot more mobile and therefore a lot more able to be stolen. How about battery hits on this because of the encryption? From what you're saying, it sounds like it's not terribly performance intensive, but it is.
No. I mean, I didn't measure battery life with and without, but it's going to be minimal because again, when FileVault is doing, when you turn it on, it's got to encrypt everything. So of course, during those few hours that it's churning through all of your data, it's going to be using up CPU, it's going to be using up battery. But once it's encrypted, it's only used as needed. So when a file is read off disk, it's decrypted. When it's written to disk, it's encrypted. So it's really not putting much additional strain on your CPU and therefore not much additional strain on your battery because you're still doing the same reading and writing activities. It's just doing a little bit more computation with each read and write. So I'm not going to say it's zero effect, but it's not a big effect.
Got it. Okay, so those are some of the main concerns I would have or questions I would have about FileVault. What should I be asking you? What have the people sent you that is out of the blue or maybe very case specific that we should be aware of?
Well, one of the things I encountered was there was a bug in the original, when FileVault came out in Lion, so 10.7.0, 10.7.1 had a bug that would enable an attacker with physical access to your Mac to go through the FireWire port or through FireWire via Thunderbolt if you have Thunderbolt, read the contents of your Mac's memory even if it's asleep, and find in memory the FileVault decryption key and decrypt your data. Now, Apple fixed this bug in 10.7.2, so it's been fixed for a long time. But there are still websites that talk about this exploit as though it's like, it happened, but then the website didn't go back and say, oh, it's not a problem anymore. The information, it looks like it's still a live thing. And there's the company that actually discovered this exploit is a security firm called Passware, and they sell forensic software to law enforcement and stuff. And one of their apps, it costs $1,000, okay, but it still claims to be able to do this trick, and it doesn't specify anywhere in their marketing materials that, not unless, only for 10.7.0 or 10.7.1. And it turns out that if your Mac is on and you've decrypted FileVault, that is, you've unlocked it, and you're logged in, and it's awake, if all four of those things are true, and someone has physical access to your machine, and it has a FireWire port or a Thunderbolt port, and they have this $1,000 software, all of those things are true, then yes, they can get your FileVault password and decrypt it. But if your computer is asleep, or if you're not logged in, or if you have a MacBook Air that doesn't have a Thunderbolt port, or if blah, 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 if that complete list of conditions isn't met, then you're not vulnerable to that. So what I say is, that particular bug was just a bug that was fixed and it's fine. I would never be so foolhardy as to say it's completely invulnerable, period. I don't know what kind of quantum supercomputers the NSA has. I mean, I don't know, right? But I have no evidence of any current vulnerabilities other than you choose a sucky password, which of course, I mean, that's a pretty big vulnerability, right? As long as you have a password that nobody else knows or can guess, to the best of my knowledge, with current technology and with information available to the public, no one can crack your FileVault stuff. Now, there are, you know, you can make your data pretty invulnerable technically. You can't make it foolproof because there's always a bigger fool, right? So choosing a stupid password is foolish, and that is going to introduce a vulnerability no matter what. There are other stupid things you can do. I mean, if you walk away from your computer and it doesn't go to sleep and you don't lock it, and someone else can walk up to it while you're logged in, well, of course they can get at all your data. If you back up your data and the backup isn't encrypted, and somebody finds your backup drive, well, then of course they can get at all your data. So there's this whole list of things that, despite how great FileVault is, if you don't think through it well enough, if you're not smart about it, you could still leave these really gaping security holes. And so I talk about those holes, and I talk about what you should do about them, and I talk about, you know, particular sorts of scenarios where FileVault won't necessarily help you, and you might want to use something else instead or something else in addition. But those qualifications entered, it's pretty bulletproof.
This is kind of encouraging. This is some of the first encouraging news we've heard in security for a while, that it's something that you can do to improve the security of your material, and it doesn't sound like there's a lot of baggage that goes along with it.
There really isn't. I mean, in my experience, and you know, I've got my two main Macs are protected with FileVault, so I do practice what I preach. Well, in this instance, I practice what I preach.
True confession time, Joe?
There are some things that I recommend that I don't do. But there is very little baggage. The number one thing I find with FileVault that I find irritating is that I have to enter my password more often. So, you know, automatic login when your Mac boots up, that's right out. You can't do that anymore. You know, you have to set up your Mac so that it goes to sleep from time to time, or it turns off from time to time, and you're prompted for your password. Otherwise, what's the point? If someone can walk up to your Mac anytime, or wake up your Mac from sleep anytime, and be able to get at your data without entering a password, then there's no point to having this stuff encrypted. So, so you do have to enter your password kind of a lot, and because I recommend having a really good password so that nobody's going to guess it, it's a little bit cumbersome, right? I would love to think that in some future Mac, Touch ID makes its way from iOS to the Mac. I would love to be able to touch a thing on my Mac that is the equivalent of entering my password as you can do on a suitably equipped iOS device. I used to be able to do that, in fact. The company that Apple bought, that they got the Touch ID technology from, used to sell little USB dongles, fingerprint readers, that I had one connected to my Mac, and I would just swipe my finger to log in. And that was great, but that company no longer exists, and their software does not work on Mavericks, or I forget when the support stopped, but it doesn't work anymore, and obviously not being updated or supported. So I can only hope that that some comparable technology makes its way into OS X in the future. But apart from really that one irritation, I just don't notice FileVault. It doesn't have any deleterious effects on my productivity. Again,
that's I mean, passwords, you know, are inconvenient. You have to have an intelligently constructed password. But everything else that has to do with security seems to involve interference with your productivity, interference with your convenience. And
Yeah.
this one sounds like it's the least inconvenient of anything that I've heard for a long time.
It really is. I would never say it's perfectly convenient, just as I would never say it's perfectly secure, but as is Apple's way. It is a really, really good trade-off between security and convenience. Apart from new hardware that doesn't exist yet, it's hard for me to see how Apple could have done a better job of balancing those two concerns. So I have it. I have FileVault turned on even on my desktop Mac because I really don't think anybody is going to break in here, and steal it. It's in a pretty secure place. I have a home alarm, all the rest. All the same, I would just as soon not have to worry about it. I would like to know that if I come home one day and see that there's a hole where my window used to be and an empty desk, that I don't really have to care. I will call up my insurance agent and say, you're going to have to pay for this, and I'll get a new Mac, and I will restore from cloud backups, and I'm just not going to worry about that stolen Mac with the FileVault data because, first of all, really no one's going to guess my password. But secondly, if I were worried at all, I could use Find My Mac to remotely wipe my entire hard drive. So I'm covered two ways.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we all get a little focused on being able to wipe our iPhones or iPads, and you forget that you can wipe your Mac.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I talk about that in the book. I talk about using Find My Mac's both location features and locking features and wiping features, and exactly what that means. I go into, I have a couple of geek moments. I have now warning, the next 3 paragraphs are really geeky, where I talk about sort of the how the underlying encryption works and stuff like that. But as is normally the case for my Take Control books, it's written for anyone. It's written for anyone who just wants to keep their data safer. You don't have to know a lot about technology. You don't have to know a lot about encryption. But I hope to answer all those questions that you might have had, and point out things that you may not have realized you should worry about, but be aware of this too.
So this is for anyone. How much does anyone pay for it? And obviously, it's available at TakeControlBooks.com. Yeah,
so this is a $10 ebook, and with this particular title, it's just $10. We don't give you the option of paying more if you'd prefer to. I would have to say, if anyone buys this book or any of my books and feels like $10 is too little, and you really want to give me more money, I can make that happen. I have the technology to transfer money from you to me. So just get in touch, and I will find a way to make that happen.
In large quantities, even.
I will do what has to be done.
You always do, Joe. You always do. I'm excited now to try FileVault. I obviously want to get the book and let you walk me through it, just because there's still that little bit of paranoia. But at the same time, you've already told me some things I didn't know about FileVault. So
there's lots of cool stuff. We haven't even touched on recovery keys and what those mean and where they come from and what you can do with them. But the more I've learned about it, the more I'm like, wow, Apple engineers are really smart. They're really smart. They thought through a lot of things that would have never occurred to me, and they came up with really clever solutions. And, mad props to the Apple engineers, because I think they did a really swell job on FileVault.
Mad props to you for going through and explaining it for the rest of us.
Yeah, well, I didn't think there would be so much to say about it. There turns out to be quite a lot. I learned a lot. I feel happier and safer and more content using FileVault now than before. And I feel a lot more confident in answering people's questions about how stuff works and what they should and shouldn't do and what isn't possible. So I think for anyone concerned about protecting their data, who's maybe anyone who's thought about FileVault or toyed with the idea, but you have some concerns or you have some questions or just some nervousness, hopefully this book will put everything to rest. And I should say, too, I mean, we're releasing this book a few months before Yosemite ships. As far as I am aware, basically everything still stays the same in terms of FileVault with Yosemite. At least if there are changes, I'm not aware of them yet. There could be. If something interesting changes with FileVault when Yosemite ships, of course we'll update the book.
And it might be a good thing to just say right now that just because you turn on FileVault, you can turn off FileVault too.
Sure.
And it goes back to unencrypted.
Yeah, you can turn it off whenever you want, and there are times that I've had to do that, and it's fine. I mean, it takes some time to encrypt, it takes some time to decrypt, but while it's doing that, you can continue using your Mac. It's fine. So it's just not a big deal.
Yeah. And that's one of those projects that you probably set to do overnight while you're sleeping.
Overnight's a really good time.
Yeah. Take Control of FileVault from Joe Kissell. Joe, it's one more. What'd you say? This 47 or 49? Is that?
This should be number 47 if I've remembered correctly.
Okay. Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah, coming up on 50 really soon.
What, next week?
Honestly, it could be as late as Q4 2014.
Oh, wow.
It could take me that long, but I'm writing as fast as I can.
You slacker.
and I would just tease the audience when I get to that. By the way, I will get to 50 ebooks before I get to age 50. When I get to 50 ebooks, I'm planning a little special something. So stay tuned.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to hearing more about that.
Special something.
At Q4, if not sooner. So.
The way the winds are blowing, it seems like it could be in the next several months.
Look forward to it. Joe, thanks so much for sharing your FileVault information, and as always, just for sharing your knowledge.
My pleasure.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. We're happy to share our knowledge with you, from people like Joe and everybody else that you find here. I hope you will join us again. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.